welcome you all to the fortnightly symposium of In Tandem Research Club, Department of English, Queen Mary's College. I am Nishi Namita, a student of second MA English, and I will be your conqueror for today's session. For the academic year 2000 to 2025, we have chosen the theme Conflict, Peace, and reconciliation and planetary. And today focus begins on the transnational flows in independence and civil rights movements. We are deeply honored to have a distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Malavika Menon from the Department of International Studies, Political Science and History at Christ University, Bangalore. Welcome, ma'am. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed paper presenter, Ms. Sai Pallavi and Mr. Isai Amuthan. A heartfelt welcome to all faculty members, research scholars, and students joining us for today's session. Our symposium will begin with the keynote speaker, followed by the paper presenter. Now it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Malavika Menon. Our academic training in political science and our teaching and research covers various topics such as Indian politics, political theory, minority education, and issues surrounding religious and cultural diversity. She has contributed to projects on partition as a conflicts resolution methods and actual work on Jawaharlal Nehru official papers. Dr. Maran has taught a wide range of subjects, including political thoughts, global politics, and Indian politics. Her publication focus on minority education, institution, and the Indian constitutes and Supreme Court. Today, she will speak on the topic transnational flows in independent and civil rights movements. We are truly privileged to have you with us today, ma'am. I now invite Dr. Malvika Menon to take over the floor.
Thank you, Nishi, and I thank the members of the department to give me this opportunity to present a small section of what we are doing as part of your tandem club. I was told that I would have to speak on transnational flows in civil rights and independence movement. And when I first heard of the title, I was wondering what it is, because it opens up, given that I'm also, a faculty of political science, I was wondering what all that I would have to say, with regard to that particular topic. And when I was filling up a certain form that we had to submit here, I kept the title like that. I kept it at what was already there, published as part of your agenda. Because it was overwhelming. And then when I started making the PPT, and I kind of came up with this title. It's kind of I try to encapsulate the whole idea of rights, which we often associate with states. Solidarity, which is the key theme when you're talking about anti-colonial movements and civil rights movements, especially when you're talking about a very strong transnational element in it. And of course, the entire struggle of not only getting your freedom, fighting for your freedom, but fighting against discrimination, fighting for your status as a citizen. And the reason I wrote citizens as nations is because when you're looking at independence movement itself, when we talk about a transnational element there, you're wondering which nation you're talking about. I mean, are you going to talk about the colonies, or are you talking about the members of the subjects of the colonized states who are sent to different countries depending on where the imperial power wants them to go, whether as labor, whether to fight a war, etc. And so this is what I mean. Of course, we'll have a question answer session, so I welcome questions by way of clarity or curiosity. So one of the first things I did is to kind of try and unpack the whole idea of transnationalism itself. what comes to mind, and I just did a Google on the term, and these are some of the pictures that came. Of course, I picked on those pictures. I mean, there were a whole range of them that were out there, and you'll see that the first one is about transnationalism in medieval times. So, and this is also to kind of establish the whole concept of transnationalism, and how we understand it today, and I'll come to that soon. Then, of course, this is a picture from the museum. There's a kind of an exhibition on the African slave trade. So that was also something that, when we start talking about way down in history, when you start talking about the civil rights movement, etc. I would also be touching about a little bit about the anti-abolitionist movement with respect to and how its impact on India. So all of this also kind of draws back to this idea of transnationalism, though in a very different way, perhaps not in a positive way. I found this image very fascinating. This what looks like a pottery thing with Coca-Cola written on it. It seems like an amalgamation of the modern with the traditional, and of course this is a common picture. The last one we see of people protesting, I think, is a very very common scene nowadays when we talk about civil society and other kind of protest movements that come from associations, that come from citizens, which are part of a state, but which are also contesting state power. Um, I would just, so this is what I'm going to be touching upon, because I find that the two presenters after me are going to be speaking about specific movements. I wanted to do a kind of a general mapping, also because it is so vast. The topic is so vast. So I just thought I'll touch upon a few ideas. So the presentation would be along these lines. So one would be a little bit of a discussion on transnationalism itself. And when we talk about transnationalism, and we talk about it in the context of the civil rights movement, or in particular the anti-colonial movement, what emerges is a politics of solidarity. And this is a very common concept. It's a very common terminology and a vocabulary that is used when we talk about this topic. I'm sure many of us here are already very familiar with it. So I thought we could talk a little bit about that. Then we have the Gandhian repertoire, which is essentially talking about, because when you talk about anti-colonial struggles, and when you also talk about the civil rights movement, was there an adoption of Gandhian strategy by the civil rights movement in the USA? So there's a small little piece of information on that. That is what we'll be touching upon in the Gandhian repertoire. And of course, an example or two regarding contemporary transnational movements and perhaps transnationalism, the way we understand it in a very specific and intense concept of globalization, liberalization, and privatization. So to begin with, often now, at least when we understand transnationalism now, we understand it largely as a component of globalization. Of course, terminologies like transnationalism, globalization, etc., are also terms that we use from that. So it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, this is what we also teach when we're teaching papers on globalization. That's countries being interconnected through trade, definitely not a new phenomenon. Through culture, also not a really new phenomenon. But yes, the intensity of it, the frequency of it, has definitely multiplied over the decades. And the 21st century is definitely the century of intense globalization, and therefore transnationalism literally does have the exact meaning that it should have in terms of looking at the state system and looking at the nation state system. Transnationalism, and when we're talking about transnationalism in the context of civil society and movements, we'll also look at individuals and civil society movements across borders. So, in that specific context of what we are required to discuss today, it does look at individuals and civil society movements, and it looks at how globalization can impact these movements. It can impact it positively, it can also impact it negatively. Okay, so what are the positives of it in terms of the outreach, in terms of the distribution of the media distribution, the I wouldn't look at the ideological part of it as such, but in terms of also the networks, in terms of the information that is there. There are, of course, when we begin to talk about transnationalism, one of the things that comes to mind is a large number of immigrant networks that already have existed through the centuries, in particular through the 20th and now the 21st centuries, which not only look at the cultural aspect, but they also look at the economic, social, and familial aspect as well. But then again, when we speak of transnationalism, why is it that we have to give a specific terminology like this? Why can't we just call it a cross-border activity? After all, it is cross-border activity, and it has been happening in the past as well. So I've kind of taken two references here. Portis, who speaks of four types of actions across cross-border. So if you're looking at cross-border activity, what are the different kinds of cross-border activities? And one, of course, is those that are conducted by the states themselves, by the national states themselves. Two, they are the ones that are done by formal institutions within one country. So that's another classification of what cross-border activities can be. Then, of course, you will have formal institutions that exist in multiple countries. And the last, which is of course the focus of what we are doing today, is the non-institutional actors or the civil society. And they're very significant because um, they seek out the legitimacy in and from the people itself. So state legitimacy is important, but it isn't as important as getting recognition, getting acceptance of the larger body of people out there, the larger global impact. Transnationalism, also as a phenomena, is grounded in social networks. It has a consciousness that spans multiple identities. So you may start with, let's say, a question of gender, but it will also cover questions of caste and class and labor and everything. So it's always kind of addresses intersectionality of identities when we talk about these kind of movements. All right. It also recreates a certain social space. So how you look at a public sphere, how you look at a space is also something that many of these civil society movements would urge us to look differently. All right. And more importantly, it also becomes a site of political engagement. Often, civil society is known as something that brings to the forefront which the states and the governments have not been able to give full attention to, and in fact have neglected. And civil society has made it, brought it to the forefront. So yes, civil society is not technically political, but it is very, very political in terms of the kind of issues it raises, and in kind of the support that it builds. All right. So when we're looking at the first element which I talked about the fact that we look at transnationalism, and then we will look at the element of solidarity. So when we're looking at solidarity, the politics of solidarity, you can look at, and in this particular case, I took up a piece with respect to Africa and the Portuguese colonization of Africa, because it drew my attention when I was looking for material to work on this presentation, because it was looking at and I think some of our presenters here might associate with that a lot. It was looking at how how poets, I mean students much like yourselves, at the time, so some African countries were colonized by the Portuguese, would actually use poetry as a vehicle of to raise anti-colonial consciousness. So that was a very interesting concept, I felt. And so you're looking at, when you're looking at that, you're not looking at colonialism just as a space, just as a territory, but you're also looking at the different kinds of social relations that are emerging there. So in this particular case, you would see that African students who had in fact gone they'd gone in fact to Portuguese to pursue higher studies with no intention of gaining any kind of national consciousness. They'd gone there so that they could return to their respective countries, whether it's Angola, whether it is Mozambique, etc. In order to pursue their whatever respective services, whether the bureaucracy or whether it's doctors, etc. But you would see that going there, as we all know, it has also been the case with many of the nationalist leaders in India as well. Going there, being exposed to different kinds of literature, meeting members of your own country, your own community from different countries, having a similar experience of um, colonialism in terms of deprivation, in terms of exploitation, etc., had that effect of raising an anti-colonial consciousness. So, in a way, it made it made room for a lot of debate and discussions on how Portugal, in fact, had colonized these countries and how that was not. That was not the way to go about it. And you would see that this was then the birthplace of many future leaders of many of the African countries who were at the helm of the anti-colonial movements in their respective countries. And you would see that along with the discussions that they had amongst themselves, you also found that they were exposed to international literature, and they began to connect all of this in terms of what was happening, in their homeland and what was happening elsewhere. They began to make connections, and you'd find that this is how it raised a sort of a anti-colonial consciousness amongst them. There were some of the poems of Neto of Angola, who captures the connection of solidarity rooted in shared sadness. So his poems, I wasn't able to quote the poems here except one last stanza I've taken, and I'll tell you why. So you see that many of these poets, many of these students, in fact, Neto, Souza, all of them would capture the condition of the people of their country who were subject to colonialism, not only in present, but also a whole history of violence and exploitation. And their poems also captured a hope for a future free of this oppression, free of this colonization. And there were different ways. So, if one captured a lot of shared sadness, Souza's poems, especially Samba, would try to inculcate African American music and dance. To take instruments that are used by Africans, and kind of write about that. And it is not so. It was not just about a description. It was not just about saying that this is what our music is like, but it was also to challenge a certain kind of benevolence that we all associate with an imperial power, a power that comes in and says that you're all barbaric and you need to be civilized. So the way you live, the what you eat, the language you speak, and the music you listen to, and your dance, everything is something that needs to be more refined. So samba is a response to that. To that attitude itself, to that positioning itself. Then, of course, you have Nito's friend Musunda, who I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, which captures, the angst between the communities of Africans who have been, separated by the Portuguese as who follow a policy of assimilation for some and a complete exclusion of others. And of course, those who are assimilated are known as assimilatados and indigenous. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing, but you would see that many of them experienced, therefore, Portuguese colonization in a very different way. Okay, so those who were assimilated It's not that they did not face racial discrimination. They did, but they were slightly better off than the indigenous who were exploited, subject to violence, and who were not given education, who were sent off to distant lands, pushed into forced labor. So there was a certain division that Portuguese colonization, in fact, instilled in amongst the Africans, and they found that they were practically alienated from each other as well. And Nito's friend Musanda actually gets out these emotions very powerfully. All right, Alda Espirito's Avo Mariana, or Grandma Mariana, also gets out this angst of families being torn apart because there are people who are forced into labor, who are sent off to distant lands, and then you do not know about their whereabouts. Her focus, of course, is in particular on the plight of women and children. Of course, lastly, you have Antonio Jacinto's letter from a contract worker. I kind of took this last stanza from there because I found it fascinating. It kind of captures many of the elements of what I just mentioned before in terms of denying many of the Africans, the indigenous, a right to education and access to education, the cruelty of colonialism, because this is actually by way of a love letter that two lovers are trying to exchange. And it says here, I wanted to write you a letter, but oh my love, I cannot understand why it is, my dear, that you cannot read, and I, oh, the hopelessness, cannot write. So in a way, I felt it captured, the angst, the situation that many of the Africans were put through when you're talking about, Portuguese colonization, and how through these poems they were able to express not only their conditions, but they were also able to, draw a certain kind of solidarity between what were going to be different countries of Angola, Mozambique, etc. So many of the regions that were colonized by Africa, in a way, found a certain kind of solidarity through these poems and through these writings. I was wondering whether to mention this at all, because this is something I came across when I was reading a book a couple of months back, which is the anti-intenger movement in India, all right, starting around 1917, when the British government, on account of World War I, had decided that they would do away with do away with sending Indian labor to foreign lands. Of course, this was a form of forced labor. And when you're talking about building of solidarity here, and of course, when you're talking about the element of transnationalism, you do come the accounts of Kunti, who was so in this particular case there are multiple layers. So, for instance, Kunti is a married woman of a lower caste, an untouchable caste, in fact, the Chamar caste in Uttar Pradesh. And she sent even Sanadhya. Both of them are sent at different points in time, of course, to Fiji, to the Fiji plantations. And Kunti somehow escapes and comes back. And she escapes a very, very harrowing experience of near sexual harassment in the Fiji plantations, and she returns. And Sanadhya, who has been an former indentured labor but had returned to India around 1914-15, captures this story of Kunti's and publishes it in an abolitionist newspaper called Bharat Mitra, which is a Hindi newspaper published in Calcutta of those days. And this gains a lot of popularity, and it kind of also brings inter-caste solidarity, because you would see that the Bharat Mitra was actually established and sponsored largely by the Marwari community. The Bharat Mitra and the accounts and the narratives of many of the indentured labor that was sent by the British of Indians also presents to us a sort of an attempt at challenging these colonial oppressive regimes, and how do they counter it? Because it's not possible. I mean, you're still a colonial subject. One of the things that Sanadia did was to request that somebody of a legal background be sent to Fiji, to the Fiji plantations, to fight on behalf of the Indian indentured labor there. And the reason I mentioned the role of Manilal Maganlal is because we will be coming to him again when we speak about, when we speak about the Gandhi's repertoire. So Manilal was a barrister who, in fact, was told by Mahatma Gandhi himself to go to the Fiji Islands, Fiji plantations, and fight on behalf of the indentured labor there. And it is there where he started the first Hindi paper in Fiji. So these were also ways in which, as you know, through which I mean, we can't call them civil society movements, but yes, and it's not really leading to the anti-colonial movement per se, but there were multiple small little freedom struggles of different kinds that were happening in countries. And even though we talk about the Indian National Congress and we talk about Mahatma Gandhi's role, and of course, that's very important. But these are also very important points, and junctures that we need to look at. And you would see that, in fact, this became a very big issue because it didn't kind of remain within a small little, area of of Calcutta, not small, but of Calcutta or the Bharat Mitra. But this was an issue that it was eventually picked up by the Muslim League, by the Indian National Congress, and it gained a lot of attention across the political spectrum of that time. So I felt that this was also something that we could look at when we are talking about building a politics of solidarity. So the transnational element comes out in a very, very different way. It comes out because colonies are attached to different countries because they are subjects of an imperial power, and not because we are, in fact, nations who willingly interact with different countries. The next thing that we can look at, Dr. Preeti, how much time do I have, please? I know I was given 15 minutes. Dr. Maria?
Uh, yeah, you can take another 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So when we're talking about the Gandhian repertoire, we're talking about, in this particular context, the civil rights activists in the United States of America, who are very well aware of the Gandhian campaigns. And of course, the Gandhian repertoire already began in South Africa itself. So in a way, it already had a transnational quality about it. But you'd see that with respect to the civil rights movement, and because the civil rights movement is a very popular movement, I thought of not talking about it directly, but talking about it through this notion of the Gandhian campaign and the Gandhian strategy. Now, while they were aware of Gandhian campaigns, did they actually imbibe them immediately? Well, the answer is no. It took a lot of time for them to imbibe them. And one of the earliest that we come to is in the 1950s in the Montgomery bus boycott that we're talking about. In this particular case, when we're discussing repertoire, we're actually talking about how movements, whether civil society movements or social movements, and protest groups in particular, would look at a certain set of practices and routines, and how we take those practices and routines and how do we use that to interact with members, whether it is the establishment of the time, whether it is people who we would like them to join us, or whether they are in fact bystanders. So how what kind of routines or what kind of practices do we in fact inculcate? And Gandhi was very clear about that practice, as we all know. It was always supposed to be, of course, to begin with, satyagraha, insistence on truth, and non-violence. So, of course, these are two principles that he wished that everybody would imbibe, especially non-violence, and that is what kept set apart perhaps Gandhi's idea, Gandhi's strategy, and Gandhi's techniques as very distinctive from many of the others around. So you would see that when you're talking about the insistence of truth, it not only involved just speaking the truth, which of course it is, it's also a lot to do with ideas of self-discipline, ideas of how you are to negotiate with authorities, how do you negotiate with opponents, how do you speak to people who you know are very hostile to you, okay, and what kind of appropriate behavior should protesters actually inculcate. So with Gandhi, it was never something that stopped it. So non-violence was not just about not attacking; it was also about a way of life. It was also about how to contend with people who were violent, very violent. Now, it went to an extent where Gandhi would say that even if it means so, protesters who believed in satyagraha had to go all out, and if it meant that they fought and I mean they kind of were in opposition to the British, and if it meant that they had to be arrested and punished, they would willingly, allow themselves to be arrested and punished, and they would obey their leaders. And of course, non-violence as a creed was there throughout, but he did believe in certain kinds of direct action. If Satyagraha did not yield the desired result, then of course strikes were permissible, a certain economic boycott, non-cooperation, civil disobedience. So there were a bunch of techniques that Gandhi did, or that we can see as part of Gandhi's repertoire. But Satyagraha was something that is that we could start really talking about, and therefore the content of Gandhi's actions, or the content of what he wanted to say, was much larger and much deeper. And the civil rights movement in the United States, of course, took time to adopt many of these Gandhian tactics. You would see that in the beginning itself, well before, you would see Du Bois and Marcus Garvey of the National Association for Colored People and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, respectively. How did so they didn't adopt Gandhian tactics as much as, but they were aware of activism in India. They were aware of certain kinds of discrimination in India, and this happened because they were speaking to their counterparts in not only the US but also in India. So they were in touch with Lala Lajpat Rai, they were in touch with J.J. Singh, and having a discussion with all of these people, they concluded that the Gandhian strategies were not quite suitable to their own situation, and perhaps questions of very severe racial discrimination could not be resolved solely with means of satyagraha and non-violence. Nevertheless, the period between 1917 and 1940 did see a spread of the Gandhian repertoire through largely through the American press, the Chicago Defender, New York Amsterdam News, Atlantic Daily World, lecture tours by Gandhi's close associates, and that's why Manilal Parekh, same person, I think he's here. There's C.F. Andrews, there's Madeline Slade, and others. Yet you would see that this never took it never kind of took roots in the United States Social Forum, and a lot of the campaign that went and the mobilization that went was a contribution of the Dalit civil rights movement, and you would see that the urge here in this movement was to look at Dalit rights as human rights, okay, and therefore eliminate the whole caste and the caste discrimination that goes with it. The Dalit human rights movement was also very central in setting up the establishment of the International Dalit Solidarity Network at Denmark in the year 2000. And simultaneously, you will find that they were also, rooting for advocacy platforms in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Japan. Japan had a kind of a caste-like phenomena, not the exact caste phenomena, but a caste-like phenomena in the Buraku Liberation League. And not only the World Social Forum, but you also had their presence at the Asia Social Forum. And they also allied with the landless peasants movement, the Novox in Brazil, when they attended the European Social Forum. So, in some ways, like this, the Dalit movement also, as one of the contemporary movements, and this is not to say that there wasn't the presence of Dalits or a churning amongst the Dalit community in the colonial period or soon after. But in terms of a large transnational presence, especially in contemporary times, one could talk about this World Social Forum. So this last slide is again when I was doing a search in the Google engine, I found this picture. It's a very interesting picture by Shazia Sikandar, and this was painted around 2001 or 2002. And not only does it show multiple representations of women, in particular, because if you visit the link, I've put the link here. If you visit this link, there's a small little audio clip for about 1 minute or something where Shazia is speaking, and she's like, I deliberately wanted to present these very powerful pictures of women. So if you see, there is this kind of a plane on top, and the women are projected as strong. So you see her in between with the horns, etc. And this is in particular in response, as she herself says in the video clip, to a lot of post 9/11, when America was trying to justify its occupation and its intervention in Afghanistan. One of the many reasons it gave was
This particular song has become an identity. So before going deep into the 3 points, I would like to say that maybe the key thing that made We Shall Overcome stand out, I think it is the simplicity of the song. It is very easily relatable, and the lyrics are easy to remember and sing, which meant it could be sung by anyone around the globe. Literate, illiterate, it doesn't matter. A song is a song. When someone sings, you listen to it and you get it to your head and you just do it. And most probably, when you see into protests or rallies or anything or anything that's a collective, it is very easy for a person to grasp things like songs. So, moving on to the basic factors that made We Shall Overcome song as an identity, is, I think it is paralyzing the fear. What do you mean by paralyzing the fear? Paralyzing the fear of the protesting. The people who are protesting against the conflict, it paralyzes the fear for them. We Shall Overcome was more than just a song at that time. It gave people courage in times of fear and uncertainty, especially during protests and marches. The song reminded everyone that they weren't alone. It reminded them, it just gave them a heads up, saying that no, you're not alone, we shall overcome. So that is the song's name. And it paralyzes the fear. When they sang it together, it helped calm their fears and push them to keep going no matter how tough the situation was. Right? It united people in the face of adversity, paralyzing the fear that could have otherwise held them back. The lyrics are so simple, but it has so deep emotions that it made them, paralyze the fear. It just stops it. So I think that is a very important factor, that this particular song has become an identity, not to the origin of the song, but also to the people around the globe. So the next point is tribalism over individualism. Tribalism, a collective people, a individualism. It makes you stay who you are, stay where you are. This song is all about the power of unity. Instead of thinking as individuals, we shall overcome, encourage people to act as a collective almost like a tribe. So that is why I put in the word tribalism over individualism. The tribalism is dominating the individual characteristics of a person. It breaks the personality of a person. Even who cares a person is introvert? No, when he's joined with an extrovert, he becomes an extrovert. So that is what the basic theme behind the point. So it was a fight for the greater good, and the song helped them rally as a group. The most important point in this factor is that the Protestants put we, W-E, over me, M-E. So it is very important that the individual personality doesn't care about only them, and they work and protest as a group. And that makes we shall overcome as an identity. So the third point is surmounting subjugation. So I think the whole essence of the song is about overcoming oppression and injustice. If you go on and see the lyric in Google, you can see that it's all about oppression and subjugation and injustice. The idea of surmounting subjugation is deeply tied, it is knotted and sedimented to the idea of the song and the lyrics of the song. It reminded people that no matter how difficult the circumstances or how strong the forces of oppression were, they would eventually rise above it. That is the main factor of and that is mainly the idea of the song. It is the main idea. So, this particular idea inspired them to keep fighting for equality and justice. So, this three key factors made we shall overcome as an identity. Moving on to the next slide, we are going to see about how can we see we shall overcome song as a transnational affair. How we see it as a transnational affair. So, this one respect to other civil rights movements. So we have a separate slide for this, so I'm just going to skip that. And universality of the lyrics is very important because this particular song was the motive just because of the universality of the lyrics. The beauty of We Shall Overcome lies in its simplicity, as I said before. The lyrics straightforward. It's very, very straightforward, but they carry a deep emotional message that anyone, anywhere can relate to. Anyone, anywhere in the world, anywhere around the globe can relate to this particular song because the lyrics, the tone, the emotional message is very much relatable to each and everyone in the world. Whether you're fighting for racial equality, political freedom, or justice, the words we shall overcome are very powerful and inclusive, making the song resonate across different cultures and struggles. I see this song as a success just because of the simplicity of the song. It is very simple. It is very simple, easily relatable, we can easily connect to it, and that is why I think this particular song can be seen as a transnational affair. So the third point is adoption by international figures. So usually this particular song has been influenced by itself. You know, in tobacco protest by the tobacco factory workers, and it was then used as an anthem in US civil rights movement, and all this happened. Why it has attained great height is the question. It has attained great height and it has been considered as a transnational affair because other international figures have influenced it because of the positive aspects of the song, in the song. So global leaders and activists have recognized the power of we shall overcome. Per se, figures like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. embraced the song as part of their fight for justice, and its message spread through their influence. Uh, it is one of the factors, but it was not the only thing that made this as a transnational affair, but also it helped and it just pushed it a little to make it as a transnational affair. So the fourth point is very important. Music as a global tool of resistance, a global tool. It is not only for, per se, as I spoke or earlier, it is not only for just one conflict, not racial discrimination, not any tobacco strike. No, it is not about that. It is a global tool of resistance. It is supporting everyone who wants to protest, and it gathers everyone and it makes them feel belonging. So music has always been a way to bring people together, isn't it? So, and We Shall Overcome is a perfect example for how a song can become a tool for global movements. It's not just about the words, but the feeling of unity and strength comes with singing it together. The important thing is people are not singing it individually at their home. They are coming to a common ground and they are just, singing it. It brings belongingness, it brings unity, and that is where this particular song has has been considered as a transnational affair. Because of the simplicity, form of peaceful protest, music transcends language barriers. And this in particular has shown how a simple melody, a simple not complicated song can inspire resistance across the globe. And that's very important to note. This particular four factors are actually support us to see we shall overcome sovereign transnational affair. So we can move to the next slide. So this is a slide where the spread to other civil rights movements in the previous, the point where it says spread to other civil rights movements in the previous slide, it supports that particular context. We can see that the song We Shall Overcome has been sung in many places, including United States, Northern Ireland, China, South Africa, and India. So in United States, the song was first used as a protest song during 1945 to 1946 strike in Charleston, South Carolina. It was also sung by John Byers at the 1963 March on Washington, by Martin Luther King Jr. in his final sermon in 1968, and by Lyndon B. Johnson in a 1965 speech to Congress. In Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association used the song as a slogan and in the title of a publication about the civil rights movement there. China, the song was sung during the Tiananmen Square. In South Africa, Senator Robert F. Kennedy sang the song in South Africa in 1966. In India, the song has been translated into many languages, including Hindi, Malayalam, Bengali, and Kannada, and is sung as a patriotic song. So, all these five countries, I think the most that took up me by surprise was India, because India is is a country filled with heritage and cultures and so many religions, and it is surprising to see that one particular song travels through seas and borders, international borders, and it has reached India, which is rich of culture, and here it has been translated in Bengali and Canada. How proud of this and how influential songs have been. India is the best example of this. It is sung as a patriotic song. So with this, we can see how can be influential thing, influential key to any conflict around the globe. And that is why this particular song in particular, which because it is very simple and relatable, this particular song has been considered as a transnational affair. Now we go to the next. How music can influence people beyond its motive. So how it can influence people. Usually when we see movies or a series or anything for this matter, the sedimented emotions in our heart is dug up, disturbed with music, with tunes, with lyrics. We relate ourselves to it. We cry for it. We get angry. We get anxious of our life. So music is full of emotions. It is full of empathy. It push to whatever you want to achieve. So the first one is still emotions. The song touches hearts, making people feel hope, empathy, and determination. So the second point is bring people together. In such cases, Overcome has brought in many people together, and it has fed people with belongingness and unity. It has people a strong sense of community and shared lifting spirit. It encourages you. It brings in the taste of patriotism and etc. And we shall overcome inspires strength, faith, helping people believe in the power of their cause. So the fourth one is goes beyond the moment. So obviously we have many examples which we can take it for ourselves. We would have 90s songs which we listen even now. But maybe the lyricist may have died, or the song producer may have died, or the director, or everyone would have passed away. But the song has its own place in our hearts. So this is what they're trying to say here. The song's message lasts through time, inspiring people across generations and different moods. So that's all with my presentation. I just want to conclude by saying that a song can be so impactful and so influential, and in particular, we shall overcome is something very beyond words. It is beyond words. There are many songs which handle with the theme of patriotism or unity or anything for that matter. We shall overcome by this song because it is uh, a song for talk for the simplicity, the lyrics, the relatability. So I think this is how I want to conclude, and it's amazing how something that started out as a simple, normal protest song in one corner of the world grew into an anthem that represented so many people's struggle, freedom, and justice. And I would like to finish up. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, Sai. Ma'am, we have one more presenter. Can we take just another few minutes?
Yes, ma'am. I'll stick around. I'll stick around. No problems. Thank you.
So actually, he's a musician.
Yes, exactly. No, I saw the poster and I saw, so I'm sticking around. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Yes, I'd love to.
Thank you. Next, I invite Mr. Isai Amuthan, a musician and language enthusiast. Although his primary focus is on music production, live performance, and music education, he has passion on English literature and innovative linguistic concepts. His paper focus on the title Dalit Pattern, Movement and Translation Influences. I now welcome Mr. Isai Amuthan to present this paper.
Good evening, all. It's a pleasure to participate in this presentation. I'd like to thank Dr. Malavika Menon for the wonderful keynote address that she had given us. I'd like to thank Dr. Maria Preeti for giving me this opportunity. So today my presentation is going to be um, on the transnational flows in independence and civil rights movements, under which we are going to see the Dalit Panther movement and it and its transnational influences. Before we start, I'd like to first give you all a little bit of clarity of what the word Dalit means. In general, Dalit is understood as a person from the scheduled caste community. And when we say scheduled caste community, uh, that term is also misunderstood. Like when we say when you hear from your friends or anyone that they are from the scheduled caste community, you tend to look at them as, like, different people, like not like the backward caste or anything, but but the truth is, scheduled caste is also one of the other backward communities. So OBCs, we call it as OBCs, other backward communities. So there is a schedule prepared for certain communities because they were socially boycotted and oppressed in the name of caste. So that's why it's called the scheduled caste, and it's not something detached from the OBCs or anything. So, anyways, so let many incidents that happened. Cite many incidents. Food was a problem in black community, and they had managed it. So they encouraged community members to support black-owned business. Yeah, you see, they to have a growth within the black community, they had encouraged people to buy from their own people. And yeah, this is all, as I said, cultural, artistic expression and cultural events that highlighted black history and contributed. Yeah. So the sense of pride. This is important. Sense of pride. When you are socially oppressed, you tend to lose your confidence, and you won't value your life at all. So that sense of pride has to be, you know, respawned or rebooted again. So that they did, and yeah. So due to the policing, they were carrying guns and things like that. They were always being targeted by the police, and there was a lot of violence that happened between the police and them. And Newton was, I think, he was he was arrested once, and there was exchange in fire, and I think police officer by the name John Frey, he was killed, and Newton was arrested. He was also shot, and he was admitted in the hospital. By then, Aldrich Cleaver took over the leadership. That's the next leadership. And Ronald Reagan, the governor of California at the time, he opposed the Panthers. He said it was purely a Marxist party, and it was a disease to his nation. That's what he said. And the next leader was influenced by Karl Marx, Voltaire, Richard Wright. These are writers, you know. And this counterintelligence program by FBI was made to, subside the violence and control. The state controls. Usually, when there is some sort of resistance in the country, the state controls it somehow using their police or military or any sort of power. So this program, under this program, the FBI targeted Black Panthers. Actually, they infiltrated into the party, and they kind of killed a few leaders also. And finally, the organization was dissolved in 1982. This is Black Panthers. Now, Dalit Panthers were inspired by, the name was inspired from Black Panthers. And they read about Black Panthers in the Time magazine. They thought, when they were about to form a party, they named it as Dalit Panthers. And I think it was after a series of atrocities against Dalits, especially the Keel issue. 42 people were burnt alive in Tamil Nadu, in Keel. So after that incident and many other incidents, they formed this Dalit Panthers. The founding member was Nemdio Dasal, Raja Dale, and J.V. Pawar. And these were all poets and writers. All of them were poets and writers. So Raja Dale's Kala Swatantra Din, so Black Independence Day, was an article. It brought a lot of sensation back in those days, and the other two founding members met with him, and they decided to start this Dalit Panthers. So the primary aim was to combat caste discrimination in India. You know what caste discrimination is. I'm sure you would all be knowing about caste discrimination. Like when you think someone is lesser than you, and on that line you deal with them, then that is a caste discrimination. Like if you try to put them down, or consider them as a lower human being, that is caste discrimination. So the Dalit Panthers were dealing with the social injustices faced by Dalits and the oppressed community. So what they did, they gave legal rights, just as how the Black Panthers did. They provided legal support by appearing for them in courts, and by getting them out of false complaints and things like that. So in cultural empowerment, they promoted this Dalit literature and culture, like writing poetry and in art field, like that, even music also in that case. So they used art as a tool, like as the previous presenter told, that music is very powerful. It reaches across the globe. It is powerful, and they used it as a tool. As the Black Panthers identity, as I said, the sense of pride was not there in the communities, because the caste system, which considered a lower human being, a menial being, like so they had kind of cultivated the sense of pride among the Dalits. And formation of political parties. This is very important. Many political parties were inspired by the Dalit Panthers. In fact, the party that's currently in alliance with the DMK, the VCK, or the Vidudalai Siritai Kachi, was once called the Dalit Panthers of India. So they were once the Dalit Panthers. Now they have become a, a state party. Yeah, they organized protest rallies to demand justice. There were many issues back in those days, a lot of atrocities against the Dalits, and they voiced out for it, and they organized protests, and educational initiatives. Um, Education is something that Dalits were disengaged from. So, as our keynote speaker mentioned, the colonialism had damaged or restricted education in other countries. But in India, education was restricted by religion, that is Hindu religion, which was primarily known as the Brahmanism. So it functions under this Chaturvarna. We call it as the fourfold system. I think people would be knowing by now, but I'd like to just quickly go through it. So it segregates human being. I mean, people in four classes. Like one is, you must be knowing, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and Dalits do not belong to this Varna system. They were not even worthy of being in the system, or it is to be understood that they did not accept the system, the Varnashram system. So they were not placed in the system. They were outside the Varnashram fold. So educational initiatives were done by Dalit Panthers. They advocated for scholarship and educational support. Mobilizing the crowd. Yeah, this is one thing. If any oppressed people, if they get together and and they protest or they voice out for their rights, it would create an impact. But to get them together is it was a hard thing, and then they mobilized. Dalit Panthers mobilized. Yeah, so they helped out whenever there was a discrimination or atrocity done against the Dalits. Dalit Panthers protested, and they helped them in all sort of assistance, like giving them legal support and protest and other things that we had seen earlier. Yeah, so awareness programs. So they conducted seminars to educate the public about the plight of Dalits and to promote social change. In those seminars, they would explain about the history of Dalits and why they were untouchables, or earlier untouchables, and why they were not in the Varna system, and things like that. And as I told, they would create a cultural identity and give them some pride in their community. Yeah. So Dalit Panthers were inspired by activism of Black Panther Party in US, and both advocate for social justice and empowerment of marginalized communities. So this presentation reminds us the enduring fight for social justice and importance of standing in solidarity against all forms of discrimination. Maybe in another presentation I can take more time and explain this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. In this symposium, you are now welcome to ask questions related to the presentation.
Thank you, Nishi, and thank you to all the speakers. Dr. Malavika Menon to respond to questions today.
Yes, Dr. Preeti, please. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. If you can give your remarks on the two.
Okay, yes. So I would like to thank yeah, Sai Krupaa, if I'm not wrong, Sai Krupaa and uh,
Isai
Isai,
Amuthan.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Very rich presentations, extremely rich, and it's always a delight. Are we all MA students here, or are we other practitioners as well? Are these MA students?
MA students and some PhD scholars, few faculty.
No, the two who are presented.
The two are MA students.
Oh, then that's excellent. So I was telling Dr. Maria here that we're listening to future faculties speaking, because I think not just in terms of the content. Of course, the content was very rich, and as I mentioned when I started speaking, I could see in the title itself that each of the presenters were focusing on a particular theme, whether it is a song that had transnational elements. Who would ever think of music like that? And not just, or perhaps we could still think of transnational elements because we listen to music from different countries, but who would think those songs build solidarity, and songs of protest, and how that kind of music is adopted and accepted by a whole range of people. So I think it's not just about music; it's also how the music is speaking to you. And I think Sai Krupa brought that out very well. I was quite fascinated with the whole individualism and tribalism part of it. And if I were to ask a question, if I'm allowed to Sai Krupa, I would just be curious about why we use the term tribalism. But I quite like the thrust of the individual and the collective, because I think I'm not sure if it's a disciplinary thing, but when we in political science would always talk about group identity or a collective identity vis-a-vis an individual identity. So I think that's perhaps the lens that I was looking at. But if Sai Cooper could respond to that, otherwise it's all right. And Isaiah, your presentation was a delight. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about this. And especially, I mean, I never really got the opportunity to discuss much about Ambedkar in my presentation, but the annihilation of caste is something that I tell students, whether they are just coming into college or about to graduate. It is something that I always tell them. And I always raise it regardless of what subject I'm teaching. So if it's a political theory, or Indian politics, or international relations, or I mean, I will somehow make a space for that. So yes, extremely relevant. And I wish you had in fact given those small anecdotes in the beginning, those instances and those events, because I think that is what we look for. Of course, your presentation was very rich in terms of, and we all know by now that organization and structure is also extremely important for a movement to succeed. There's only that much a movement can sustain. So even social movements that last over a long period of time begin to develop a structure, even though they might not hint at it in the beginning. So yes, I think those, in fact, if we have time, you can give one or two of those events that you were talking about, or those examples that you wanted to share with us, because I think that would have been very rich. And yes, please.
Yeah, I had took some notes that happened very lately, out of which a 10-year-old boy was strangled to death, and he was hung on a tree for a land dispute. This happened in Rajasthan, and we all know about the UP Hathras case. How they raped and murdered a girl, and before they could do the postmortem, they burnt her alive. Things like that. But one case I really wanted to talk about, this in which happened in Tamil Nadu, in here, I mean in Chennai, if you are from Chennai. So this is the murder of Gokul Raj, a student, a college student. He was studying BE in Namakkal. So this is what happens. A girl, his friend, and him had just finished an exam. The exam got over by one o'clock. girl's bus was around 4 o'clock. So she had called. She had asked him to take her to the temple. So they go to the temple, and meantime there is a character called Yuvraj. So this Yuvraj is running a based party, not a party, some sort of
Must be a fringe.
engine.
Yeah.
So he was already booked with several this emu farm, emu emu farm scams and land grabbing cases. So he wanted to get popular in the community, in his community, the Kongu Vellalar community. So what happened was he was looking for a right time and a, 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 um, a proper event to start off with. So he had already prepared that he would deal with this love and those kind of affairs to instigate the community members. So what he drawn inspiration from the other party PMK, which is in they were claiming that Dalit men were luring their community girls by wearing cooling glasses and jeans. So this was happening for some time, and there was one killing which was later connected to suicide of a Dalit boy when he got married to a OBC community, the NIC community. So these things inspire this man Yuvraj. Wow. So he was not after them. He was just in his vehicle waiting, and he saw two people enter the temple. He could sense that the girl is from his community, and the guy looks dark, and he kind of guessed it. And so he sends his men, snatches the phone. They find out what caste they are, and they take him by a railway track, and they make him do a video that he's going to commit suicide because don't trust girls, listen to your parents, that kind of suicidal note they record, and then they kill him. They first slit his throat open, and then they throw him by the tracks. So and his mother, who missed his son, she was finding out from his friends, and she came to know that he was with this girl. And the girl said this Yuvraj had taken somebody by the name Yuvraj had taken this guy, and so his motive was he should be popular in his community, that people should know that he has done the murder. At the same time, he shouldn't get caught with the police. He was on the run for more than 115 days, and finally, when the mother of this boy went to file a complaint, the girl was filing a complaint. They would not add this man's name in the complaint. So because he had some ADMK support, the other parties, the then ruling party's support, they wouldn't add his name. And finally, protest happened by the VCK, the Vidudalai Chirthai Katchi. That is the Dalit Panthers of India previously. So, and then they added his name, and the case went on for a very long time. No, all the eyewitnesses went hostile, and as usual, and it was then this famous advocate, Mr. Papa Mohan, took up this case, and he established scientific circumstantial evidences and scientific evidences, and got this man lifetime imprisonment. So I wanted to connect this with Dalit Panthers, but then
Thank you so much, Isai. That was very very informative. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Maria, in case anyone has a question for me, I'd like to respond. And
yeah, I mean, it depends on the time you have, but I'd like to say thank you for making time.
yeah, not at all, please. Srilata ma'am has raised her hands. Yes.
Srilata ma'am.
I just wanted to ask this question. I think it's meant for all of you. All. Thank you for Dr. Malavika for having given us a very succinct, but at the same time, I think a very comprehensive account of the topic we have today. And the other song, of course, by Sai Krupaa, I think I remember having learned it at school for UN Day. We practiced it for UN Day, and at that time we didn't know what all this was, and only afterwards, when I heard it on Voice of America, I knew that it was a song of protest. Of course, we had it when the patriotic song we have Monge Kamya all the time. We were singing it here also. All these movements, I mean, both the Black Panther, all these movements, uh, though they were meant to counter all these oppressions, they in turn took became a little, what do you call, became too political perhaps, and they had a lot of they were so much of shooting, as he said, the killing and shooting, and it became so many negative aspects to it. Of course, I think that is true of anything, any party for that matter. These were the extremists. I mean, they took it to the extreme. Is it a thing? What is your take on this kind of reaction? When we are talking about peace, resolving of conflicts and other things, don't we need to take? I mean, anything, any party that takes it up, when it has become a party, naturally we expect people to be more restrained and take it forward peacefully, so that we can. So what? Uh, why is it that whether in India or in any other place, it always ends in this kind of somewhat or mostly destructive activities, when people do not want to respect this party. In the parties, Vidudala Charita or Dalit we had in Bombay, all of it, in India we keep them at bay. Okay, even though perhaps they're standing up for their people, but we keep them at bay. What is it that makes them just resort to crude violence at times? But it's even the Naxal movement is a reaction to, to protect the tribals, and has that the same aspect. How do
Should I answer or?
any one of you can answer? Yes, for this you can answer on your behalf on Dalit.
Isai, you can answer. Then I don't have a direct answer to it, but yes, I would like to respond to it. But Isai, you can start. And I think Sai Krupaa has also raised her hand, and I don't mean to be this. I would definitely like to leave by about in another 5-10 minutes. So yeah, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. So you were asking why they resort to violence.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes, even today.
Okay, so violence. When you talk about violence, retaliating would be considered as violence, is it? I mean, I don't know. Can you give me some clarity?
Yes.
Retaliating for an action, would it be considered as violence, or what would you call it, ma'am? Or some sort of
Retaliating with same method as the others adopted is violence.
okay.
I'm not on any side. Okay, I am on both.
Let's bring back all the Indian army from the border. That'll be best, ma'am. What do you suggest?
I don't have particularly any.
Ma'am, no, ma'am. See, this is
They they follow the commands of the ruling ruling party.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
but it was not always violence. There were many peaceful protests and legal battling done from the parties, from the Dalit side. It was not always violence, ma'am. But can you
No, I'm not talking about then. Okay, now in the this time and now, we cannot afford violence of any kind, even if it's retaliation. I don't. I mean, and since the parties they are no longer as uneducated as they were once upon a time. So,
yeah, right. That's right. So, but you think of this incident that happened in Vengai Vayal. You must be knowing Vengai Vayal is a village in Tamil Nadu, and a few upper caste, so-called upper caste people, climb up the water tank that the Dalit colony uses,
yeah, yeah,
and they fill human
pieces.
in the tank. And small children, after they fell sick, they find out testing the water sample. So to remain a Mahatma Gandhi, in those times is a real challenge. But I don't know, when humanity, when there is enough humanity in the space, that atmosphere would be created. That's my opinion.
All human people, of course, even I would have said you must shoot all of them. All we say these things. But when the same kind of method is followed violence goes viral. There's no stopping it. As women, I think it's the same with all wars and all kinds. During wartime, nobody cares for.
That is why Dr. Ambedkar has suggested annihilation of caste is the ultimate.
Yes.
Ultimate. Thank you.
Annihilation of caste. That's another thing. Where do we start? Yes.
So, Dr. Sudhakan, if I can just by way of response, and then we'll take Sai Krupaa. Okay, Sai Krupaa has been raising her hand for quite some time. Yes, why don't you go now, and then I'll speak.
Ma'am, I just really don't want to take much of your time. So you just pointed out a point where you noticed tribalism over individualism. I'm very glad that you actually asked that because when I first sorted out the points, it was just groupism over individualism, and I thought, okay, it was very kiddish, and I don't want groupism because groupism is formed everywhere. We can see it everywhere, from our first grade, or even when we enter college, or in departments, or anything for that matter. In our everyday life, even in family, we have groupism. So I don't want that particular term to enter into this presentation. I wanted complicated and 2 points, which actually denotes unity. So I don't actually know more about tribals and their life more personally, but the ideology of bringing them in novels, short stories, or even in movies or series, we see them always as a group, not letting each other down, or always having each other's back. And I think that motivated me to replace the word groupism to tribalism, because in this particular song, wherever the conflict happened, people are always in a form of not in groups, they are in a tribalism. They always have each other's back, and that is why no one was held back. So that was the ideology behind the whole tribalism and individualism, and I'm very happy that you pointed that out.
That's wonderful, Sai Krupaa. But maybe you should keep in mind why, because as I said, sometimes we just come from different disciplines, and that's fascinating because but we I always encourage our students not to use terms generally when you come from a per se.
Mm-hmm.
But the group is, or the community is a very, very a potent unit in analysis. And even when you talk about tribalism, Sai Krupaa, just so next time what you do is when you're thinking of another word, just see. So tribalism, for instance, in sociology,
Mm-hmm.
what would it mean? It would have a very specific meaning, all right?
Yes.
And therefore, does that idea of tribalism then fit into a larger theme of transnationalism? And if it does, how does it do so? Okay, so I get where you're coming from. I get the fact
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to use a particular term because that's too colloquial and that's too common and that's very routine. And you wanted to bring out that solidarity and that cohesion and all of that.
Yeah.
But then again, tribals might just be cohesive within their own tribes, and I mean, you've heard of conflicts within tribal groups as well, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so I would just request you to maybe look at what you mean exactly when we talk about tribalism, just
Mm-hmm.
have a kind of an understanding of what that term means across some disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
where it is used, and therefore you'd be in a better position to even project that tribalism in your presentation. So I said it is very fascinating already. I would just like to respond to Dr. Srilata. So, ma'am, when you had talked about violence, so yes, of course, violence of no kind is good. Not even if you have been the victim for over centuries and then you want to respond to it. But yes, one of the things that happens is, and not the most desirable one, but it is also perhaps at times seen as a way of retributive justice. How long are you to keep quiet? And I think another way of seeing it is also to see or to respond to, or at one point react to the apathy of the state apparatus, apathy of the police, apathy of the government, the collusion of the government to these kind of things. So in that way, I'm not sure whether, I mean, I would need more time to explain what I'm about to say now. So I'm not subscribing to violence, but when we talk about violence, ma'am, we need to distinguish between this kind of violence and the kind of violence that goes like what a fringe element may use, okay, as a matter of routine. A violence that comes out of a mob, which is pointless, which is emotive completely, and a violence that is perhaps, so a military violence, for instance, is directed violence. You have a strategy, you think of combat, you think of using weapons at the last, ideally, right? But so we have to start thinking of violence when we're thinking of the kind of violence, especially from the discriminated communities of a very long time. We, again, not to justify violence, but we have to understand where that violence is coming from and distinguish it from other kinds of violence, which are assertions of power. So yeah, perhaps that would help us understand violence differently, and maybe if we learn to understand violence, we can see how to arrive at peace or to negotiate peace. I think that would be my response to what you asked.
I'd like to add one point. Uh, it could also, this question about retributive justice. And yes, communities have been discriminated against over, you know, hundreds of years. And in the Indian scenario, I think leadership matters a lot. So whether it's X or Y or Z community, if the leaders uh, can limit, if not stall, retributive acts, however justified, and uh, try to um, transcend in some way. Not to, I'm not trying to preach or be idealistic, but we need to go. There are some people who are probably stoking fires wherever. Okay, and these whoever that kind of a mindset of stoking a fire, that mindset also needs to change. Stoking a fire for individual ends, wherever it comes from. So we are we are a society in transition. So this kind of retributive justice is taking place at this point, but hopefully we need to evolve beyond that. I don't know, ma'am, if you have read this novel, Deaths of the D'Urbervilles, which we have in our English syllabus. When you spoke about retributive justice, that came to my mind. So she's raped and exploited by this land-owning person, and so she kills him finally. So there, as women, the why I took Test of the Double Bills, as a woman reader of that novel, we sympathize with her. We support that act of retribution, right? So I was thinking that we lit people, if we have to understand when Isai sir and you were talking about, we have to understand where that comes from. The story of Tess might strike a chord with us at that, to help us understand where we
Not only that, Preeti, there are a number of instances. I mean, all of Mahashweta Devi's works,
yeah,
they
yeah.
talk about what you call how they take it back, how the tribals take it on their masters. But I mean, at that I was with her all the way. I was a student of. I mean, I worked on Mahashweta Devi and all her. I read all her works, so that's how. I think that's perfect. What they are doing for themselves when it is right. But when it is organized and it becomes a political thing, it is not the people who are suffering, who suffered, who get the justice, right? It becomes vindictive acts. So that's why I wanted Dr. Malavika to talk about that.
I hope I did. I mean, as I said, it's not to justify it, but that's the kind of mobilization that they do, and then they become. I think that becomes such a routine. So I think, like Dr. Maria said, that before it becomes a routine, we need leadership. But then we go around in circles because it is because the leadership is bad that the fringe elements get the encouragement. So then we need to distinguish. So the violence of a fringe element which is trying to provoke, and the violence of someone who's trying. So in law, how they say self-defense.
Yes.
So is violence in the name of for self-defense, is that violence, or what would you say about that? So of course the community, the spread of violence, the violence should always be the last resort. I mean, I think that's where we need to take it, and any movement should always see violence as an absolute last resort. I mean, if at all. And yeah, hopefully that's what. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uh,
Thank you.
Malavika, as well as Isai and
Thank,
Sai
thank you.
Krupaa S too, for bringing back that song. I love that. Yes.
So we can conclude, ma'am.
We have now reached the conclusion of today's session. It's my honor to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, I extend my deepest gratitude to our keynote speaker, Dr. Malavika Menon, for sharing her enlightening thoughts on transnational flows in independence and civil rights movements. I also wish to thank our paper presenters, Ms. Sai Krupaa and Mr. Isai Amuthan, for their insightful contribution. A special thanks to our college principal for our support and guidance. My sincere gratitude to Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan ma'am, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of English, for her continuous encouragement and for providing valuable research opportunities. Lastly, I will thank all the faculty members, research scholars, and students for their presence today. Thank you once again. We're looking forward to meet you on October 4, 2024 with the topic Positive Peace, Negative Peace, Colonialism and Resistance. Thank you.
Sai and Nitsa, if you don't mind, can you keep your videos on and take a screenshot? Sai,
Sai Krupaa is not.
Sai. Sai, can you turn your video on? Sai Krupaa?
I think she's
Because this is her first presentation,
okay.
first ever
Just
presentation.
just a moment.
Sai, are you there? Thank you, ma'am. Sai, Sai, Sai. Yeah, Sai. Yeah, your face is not, you have to move back a bit. Hi, good evening, Srilata. Dr. Malavika, Srilata, madam is the patron of our club.
Okay. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening.